Hi, this is Daniel Hutchins, and today we're talking about an article from our friend Cinema Blend. So today from Cinema Blend, we are talking about Transformers and 5 other franchises that are immune to bad reviews. Now this was earlier this year, and it was posted at 5:48 p.m. Okay. So when it comes to Hollywood films, there are multiple measures from success. There are cinematic classics that are known hits in their time, and even those that fail at the box office. Nonetheless, though, become cult classics. We celebrate these often, but it's not too often we celebrate or acknowledge the incredibly successful franchises that critics and sometimes audiences often agree aren't that great. Okay, so many of these franchises exist in Hollywood, but I went ahead and highlighted some of the major and perhaps unexpected offenders audiences wouldn't immediately assume. That said, Transformers is probably the one everyone would think of first, which is why it kicks off this list of films series that get trashed, but still make money hand over fist despite that. Okay, we got Transformers. I think when anyone thinks of bad franchises that are insanely financially successful, Transformers is at the top of that list. With that said, I don't think we ever truly appreciate how much this franchise has been critically panned. For example, Bumblebee was the first and only time in the franchise history that the movie was universally praised by critics and audiences alike. In fact, this positive reception for a Transformers film on Rotten Tomatoes. Outside Bumblebee is the audience score for the first movie. Everything else was rotten. As much as the franchise has been panned, love for Transformers or giant fighting robots runs deep. But this franchise is a major moneymaker. With all that but one of the films resting in the top 200 highest grossing films, go figure. The one that didn't make the list was Bumblebee. As long as this franchise continues to print money, it's hard to imagine it ending anytime soon. Next on the list is Pirates of the Caribbean. This could be a hot take for some because the response to Pirates of the Caribbean franchise has been split between critics and audiences. Every movie after The Curse of the Black Pearl has been more or less a flop overall for critics, while audiences by and large are only down on Stranger Tides, which the X factor that keeps the franchise chugging along. It's hard to say for sure because if you wade through the seas for reviews for each movie, it seemingly comes down to everyone having different metric of rating for an okay movie. The only consistent thing is that people love Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow, which is probably why so many are campaigning for him to return to the role for the reboot. Pirates of the Caribbean is far from the worst franchise on this list, but to call it great, objectively speaking, is a stretch, looking on the consensus online. Next is Resident Evil. The Resident Evil franchise has had 6 live-action movies, and every single one was tremendously panned by critics. Really, the complaint is something you can say about most zombie films, being that they're all big on action, but overall lack substance. My personal gripe is that this franchise never really felt like a true representation of Resident Evil video game franchise. But I can let the gripe go now with that a series is headed to Netflix. I'm also really excited about Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, which looks to be a movie that will finally acknowledge the game lore in a meaningful way. Resident Evil may not be too faithful to its source material, but that hasn't stopped audiences from turning up to see movies over the years. According to Sci-Fi, the 6 movies have combined for a take of around $1.2 billion at the box office. The movies average about $60 million to make. That's quite a profit to turn around, even if the critics and audiences alike will continue to gripe at the quality of the franchise. So I can't blame the original film series for running as long as it did. Next on the list is Halloween. If there were a horror movie, Mount Rushmore of horror icons, Michael Myers' masked face would be on it. It's hard to argue there's a horror icon more representative of the spookiest holiday of the year, especially when the title of all their movies is Halloween. Despite its iconic status, the Halloween franchise is a 2 out of 11 in terms of positive reception from critics, and a marginally better 3 out of 11 with audiences. Everyone agrees with the original movie and the 2018 remake sequel being gold, but only audiences are warm on the original Halloween 2. This may be why the Halloween franchise ultimately decided to retcon all previous movies after the original, with the 2018 Halloween ultimately becoming the sequel to the original movie, even though I can't blame anyone who still has a soft spot for the original movies, because let's face it, slasher movies are held in different standards. I'm not looking for a cohesive plot or award-winning performances, though having those an added bonus as long as throats are getting slashed and bones are getting crunched. That's the part that really matters and has kept the lights on this franchise over the years. Next on the list is Jurassic Park. For a franchise as prolific and well-liked as Jurassic Park, we never really seem to acknowledge this franchise has struggled, with audiences and critics alike outside its first movie. Sure, Jurassic World was well received, but if you take that to how mixed The Lost World was received, and how Jurassic Park 3 and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom fared even worse. It's more fair to say that this franchise has a better history of misses than it ever did hits. But Jurassic Park is a successful franchise. I personally think it continues to be because everyone so desperately wants the franchise to recapture what was great about magnificent first film. Unfortunately, though, even the latest advancements in CGI have still had a hard time measuring up to the practical events of animatronics used in the original. Someday Hollywood will get there, and I know I would love to sit through as many mediocre sequels as it takes before it finally happens. Next on the list is Twilight. To say Twilight was panned by critics is almost an understatement, yet the adaptation of the popular books remains solid with its fandom, and to this day it is a favorite to many. This includes the sizable chunk of Cinema Blend staff who will literally fight anyone who tries to slander this franchise. They're not the only ones though, and a large part of this franchise staying power over the years has been thanks to the wonderful cast. Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, and even Anna Kendrick have gone on to do much bigger and better things in this time since. Plus, who doesn't like the classic story of an outcast girl who falls in love with a vampire that breaks all prior stereotypes of what was known about this species prior? This franchise will seemingly always have an audience for a foreseeable future, to the point I don't think it's crazy to assume that a reboot would break records in this box office. These are just a few of the franchises that have defied the thoughts and audiences of critics, but there were many more where that came from. Take a look at our upcoming 2021 summer movie slate here on Cinema Blend, and perhaps make some predictions on what other movies could defy expectations and go much longer than expected despite some rough reviews. Again, guys, make sure you lay some comments down below. Let me know what franchise you think defies limits. And again, make sure you hit a thumbs up if you like my content. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. I have some pretty awesome information for y'all to check out, so why don't you head on over to the channel Daniel Hutchins and check it all out. So again, like I said, long story short, please subscribe and have a nice day. Bye.